As you can see, I've got a slightly different setup today than the one I normally have. And that's because I just got back from a 5-day trip from New Orleans with my wife to celebrate our 12-year wedding anniversary. And I took both of my laptops that I usually use for the setup and I left them at home. So I'm kind of in uncharted territory right now. I'm trying to get used to my surroundings. And so if I fumble around with anything, that's the reason why. And for those of you who have not been to New Orleans in your life, I was saying to my wife as we were sitting in the airport last night, we had plenty of time. We actually got there early for our flight home, back home to Boston. And I was saying to her that I feel like New Orleans is a much higher ranked place than I had previously thought. And I went through, I've been to, I think, about 40 major US cities, most of the ones that you'd want to visit. And I have to say that I went through and I ranked them. And I think New Orleans might be in my top 10, maybe at the bottom of the top 10, 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that range. But definitely very, very interesting. And the biggest thing, if you've never been to New Orleans, that I would say kind of represents the experience that we had there. It's kind of just a crazy place. People are partying all the time, and on Bourbon Street, which is the main road where really everybody's out there having a great time. On Saturday night, we had an instance where people were kind of being out of control again. Just hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 people, or maybe even more than 1,000 people, just all out in the streets, pretty much chaos. And we had a police officer on a horse having a difficult time getting a couple people under control. And so he used the horse to kind of push them, you know, into a line and get them out of the way, get them off the road. And that by itself, I was kind of surprised by. But then I looked in his hand, and the police officer, he's drinking a beer. I go, what world am I in right now where a police officer that has a horse that can push people out of the way, they just did push people out of the way, is actually drinking on the job while on a horse pushing people out of the way? So I asked the person next to me who I knew was from New Orleans, and they said, "Yeah, we're just pretty kind of laid back here about the rules, meaning the cop could just drink with a beer can." And I don't know. I mean, I'm from Massachusetts, and there is absolutely no rule breaking of any kind in Massachusetts. So if you want to go to the land of the lawless, I would definitely recommend checking out New Orleans. Very, very fun place. But enough about me. Enough about me celebrating my 12-year wedding anniversary. Let's get to business, which is really this market. Oh man, this market, it is shifting faster. Really, I mean, than what I thought. Okay, because I guess I'm not sure what everybody thinks that's on this live stream right now. I'm sure you all have kind of a different opinion, maybe on where the market was going to go. But I did my last 2-day event in July. And by the way, if you haven't registered for the November event, make sure that you register right now at www.agentinvestorevent.com. It's in about 2.5 weeks, November 3rd, November 4th, at the Doubletree by Hilton in Danvers, Massachusetts. But at the last 2-day event, I did a really well thought out economic presentation talking about kind of where we're at, where I think we're going, what are the most likely scenarios. And anytime I talk about anything economics and make any sort of economic predictions, we cannot talk in terms of what will happen, because there are many, many options of what can happen. Okay. So this is not a cop out to say, hey, nobody knows, nobody can make a prediction. You can make a prediction, but what you can't say, I can't say something like rates will never go to 8%, because there's a probability, a certain percentage probability that interest rates will go to 8%. I can't say that the real estate market will fall 20% in 2023. I can't say it won't happen. There's a probability attached to all of these different outcomes. So when I'm approaching any sort of economic prediction and making, really, it's not that I want to be right and make predictions. I want to operate my business, and I want all of my listeners to operate your business knowing what the most likely economic scenarios are, because those economic scenarios change what your behavior needs to be. It changes the activities that you need to do on a day-to-day basis, depending on whether the market's going up, down, where interest rates are at, where employment's at, etc. So all that I'm going to explain to you today is what I believe and the changes that my company is making because of what's happening. So again, when I sent out the email and when I posted on Facebook and all the other social platforms, when I say I wanted to do another update on my prior forecast, I want to start out by talking about kind of where things were 90 days ago and some of the things that have changed. And again, why we're changing some of the things that we're doing, why we're changing our behaviors. Okay. So with that being said, can you all just do me a favor and type into the comment section if you can see and hear me? Again, because I was in New Orleans this weekend, I don't have my typical standard podcast setup, live stream setup. So if you guys can just type into the chat box, see and hear before I get going, just to make sure that I know for absolute certain that you guys can both see me and hear me. And then we'll go from there. Somebody said they can hear me, but can you see me as well? Let me know if you can hear me and see me. See and hear. All right, beautiful. Looks like we're good to go. So again, let's go back 90 days ago. Let's go back into July when I thought I had it all figured out. And let's talk about what was going on 90 days ago. And again, what's going on today. So 90 days ago, and by the way, the number one driver of all of this stuff right now, it's not necessarily the economy per se. It's not necessarily jobs per se. It's not necessarily supply and demand per se. The number one driver of all of this shift right now is interest rates. And I can almost guarantee that I'm not talking to a group of people who don't understand this. You all get it, right? A year ago today, interest rates were 3%. Mortgage rates were 3%. Now in July, they were at 5.5%. And in July, I was like, whoa, mortgage rates are 5.5%. That's a big deal to go from 3% to 5.5%. Over the course of a 3 or 4 year period, we had price increases all across the country between 5 and 20% per year, right? And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we had interest rates at historic lows, right? Because at the end of the day, most people don't care what their house costs. What do they want to know? They don't say, like, what's the price? They want to know what my monthly payment is. So from 2018 to the middle of 2022, or maybe the beginning of 2022, we had rates that were so low that nobody really cared what they were paying because, hey, I've got a mortgage payment that I can afford, and that makes sense. July, they were at 5.5%. Now they're above 7%. I didn't see it coming. I'm just going to tell you guys right now. I am not afraid to tell people when I'm right. I love being right. I didn't think we were going to hit 7%. Did not think we were going to hit 7%. And I did not think that 90 days later, not only were we going to hit 7%, but that we have a chance to even go higher than 7%. That is crazy. I mean, that completely changes the supply and demand. Well, no, it doesn't change supply and demand. It changes the demand side from the buyers. Okay. The demand side from the buyers has dramatically changed even in just 90 days. Okay. Second thing that I thought in July, I really thought that in my market, okay, every market's a little bit different. Markets do not necessarily always, well, they will not go up and down exactly the same. How Phoenix, Arizona is impacted is different than Boston, Mass, is different than Tallahassee, Florida, is different than Dayton, Ohio. Okay, but from my market for 2023, I thought we were going to be flat on prices. I thought that we were going to be flat with 5.5% interest rates and inventory really not changing. So this is another dynamic that's very interesting that I'm going to get to in a second. But I thought we were going to see flat prices in 2023. And I know we're not going to see flat prices in 2023 because we're already down right now. We're already down. We're already down in Greater Boston. And I talk to people all over the country. We're down in a lot of markets. Now, when I say we're down, the headlines have not necessarily been written yet. Because who sees the prices first? Us, right? We're on the front lines. We're seeing what our buyers are doing. We're seeing the types of activity that our listings are getting. We're seeing, like on my flips, hey, I thought this was going to sell for 500, but it just sold for 470, or it's under agreement for 470. And we're seeing this all across the board where we are not getting the ARVs that we thought we were going to get. Now, when we run our after repair values and we say, hey, what's this property worth fixed up? We're not aggressive. We're fairly conservative. We're not super conservative, but we're fairly conservative. And we are getting less than our ARVs for the most part across the board. Whereas 3 months ago, we were getting our ARVs. And 3 months before that, we were getting 20, 30, 40 over our ARVs. That is a huge dynamic that's changing, whether you're flipping houses, whether you're just working with retail clients, whether you're just buying and holding long-term real estate. And again, today isn't necessarily about predictions. Predictions are great, but what action do we need to take? And now, by the way, for everybody who's on this call right now, that could be a little bit different. Right? The action that I take might be a little bit different than the action that you should take, but I'm going to go through everything. So inspections, renegotiations with buyers, another thing that's drastically changed in 90 days. I mean, again, if we look at it in a 6-month increment, every 90-day window has gotten a lot different. 6 months ago today, no inspection, no contingencies, buyers were buying, going over asking, not caring what they were paying, giving the seller everything they wanted. 90 days ago, they were paying about what the asking price was, and they were, being okay about inspections, but getting inspections now, but being pretty easygoing about it. To today, most of the properties, whether we're flipping them or listing them, are having issues at inspection that are resulting in either concessions or some sort of reduction in the price. Well, that's probably a concession, right? What I meant to say was either repairs being made or concessions being made. Again, big change in sentiment from 90 days ago. Another big change that we're seeing a lot more of are people getting their loans denied, or people saying that they're getting cold feet, or people just backing out of properties for really any reason. Buyers right now are extremely nervous. They don't know what to think. I mean, really, none of us do. But I had a conversation with an Uber driver in New Orleans. And it was an interesting conversation because she didn't know I was in real estate. And we were just talking, and she was talking about, her kids. We were talking about our kids. She's talking about the fact that her daughter just put a property under contract. I think it was for $250,000, which blows my mind. And being in Massachusetts, we're at 500, 600, 700, 800. But she said, I told my daughter not to buy this house. My daughter's renting right now. I told her not to buy. I said, oh, why'd you tell her not to buy? She said, well, interest rates are at 7%. Don't buy a house at 7%. And she said, but my daughter's not listening to me. She's buying it anyways because she knows that she can afford the monthly payment. And I just thought about it, right? And parents are always, right? Parents can kill deals, right? For those of us who have been in business for long enough, sometimes the houses are never good enough, for the kids. But she's really advocating for her daughter. She's hoping her daughter doesn't buy this property because the mortgage rate is too high. And it got me thinking, like, how many other conversations are happening like this right now? And I know it's a ton. And so it's interesting because this shift is different than the last shift. It's a lot different. The last shift, you had buyers who got priced out, but then there was a huge recession, right? The Great Recession back in 2008, 2009. A lot of people lost their jobs. The stock market went down big. Interest rates went down big. But what you had then with sellers is remarkably different. So back then, you had a run up between 2003 and 2006 of people getting no doc loans, no money down loans. And by the time 2007, 2008, 2009, when prices started to fall, sellers had no equity. And everything became a foreclosure. Everything became a short sale. And sellers didn't care about losing their houses back then because they were way behind. They were way upside down on their mortgages. And most of them would just walk away. I mean, I remember going into properties. I remember doing mailers to pre-foreclosures. And I would go to meet with the seller, and they would literally just hand me their key that day. So what's so interesting, at least at this point in this shift, is the tug of war going on between buyers and sellers. And for those of you who are working with buyers and sellers right now, let me know if you see this tug of war kind of happening. So as investors, we're going out to meet with sellers face to face to buy properties for us to fix and flip. And what we're seeing, I would have thought that sellers would have been kind of in denial of the shift. But it's interesting because most sellers are not actually in denial. They see the headlines on all of the different various media outlets. I mean, it's all over that the real estate market has been slowing down. So most sellers, when we go into their house and make them an offer and say, hey, the offer would have been $300 6 months ago, but it has to be $275 right now. For the most part, most sellers are saying, I understand. It's too bad the market changed. I'm just going to stay. And we're seeing this on both the retail side and the investor side with sellers. We're seeing sellers essentially just say, hey, you know what? I kind of want to sell. I will sell if I get X. But if I can't get X, you know what? I got this 3% rate. And you know what? My house, I don't really hate it anyways. And I'm just going to stay. So I've never seen, and again, this is really a shift that took place, I would say, in the last 90 days. I've never seen both sides of the aisle be less motivated. I don't know if anybody else has been in a market, a real estate market, where they've seen this, where both sides are not motivated. Again, going back to 2008, 2009, 2010, sellers were so motivated. They were a 10 out of 10 motivated. Now, both sides are like a 2 out of 10. Both sides are like, yeah, if everything works perfect, I'm going to do the deal. The problem on the retail side for all of us who are agents is if buyers and sellers are only going to do a deal if the conditions are perfect, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Because we know on every single deal, somebody's got to give a little bit usually, right? Either each side has to give a little bit, or one side has to be so aggressive that they're just going to overtake, right? But what I'm seeing right now is if a buyer doesn't get exactly what they want, they're like, you know what? I'm good. I'll just find another property. And if a seller doesn't get exactly what they want right now, they're like, you know what? I'm good. I'm just going to stay. So this is probably not a bold prediction right now, but I think we're going to see a significant percentage less of sales, period, in 2023. Now, I don't know what that translates into. I don't know if it translates into having 10% less sales or 15% less sales, but I think we're going to see a lot of expired listings. We're already starting to see them. But I think in a lot of cases, those sellers are just going to be like, yeah, I'm not going to sell. Or maybe I'll put my house back on the market in the spring. And if it doesn't sell in the spring, you know what? I'll list it in the fall. Is anybody else seeing this tug of war dynamic where both buyers and sellers appear to be not really that motivated? Who else is seeing that out there? Okay. So the other thing that we're seeing, which is a change from 90 days ago, buyers in the last 5 years have been sitting at their house before they go to bed. They say a little prayer that the market's going to crash, right? I know you all know, and you all have buyers who are really, really hoping that prices fall like 50%. And I know that some of you guys know that some buyers really believe this and they've been waiting for this, right? And the interesting thing is that buyers think that we're crashing right now, and I can't speak for an entire group of people, of course, but buyers think we are like really, 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 really in this crazy buyer-driven environment. They think that the buyer is in control. They think it's a buyer's market. And again, it's very interesting because the dynamics are so different than before. We still have no freaking inventory. We have no inventory. And we look at our company, we post inventory year over year every day. And I've been looking at this, keep looking. No uptick in inventory. And again, why is that? It's because of this tug of war thing where sellers are just saying, you know what? I'm good. I wanted to sell, but you're not giving me what I wanted. So I'm just going to kind of sit. The other thing that we're seeing, which again, drives prices, is appraisals coming in lower and appraisers not going back very far on their comps. Again, I don't know if you guys are all seeing this or not, but the appraisals are changing, right? They're being more conservative, which automatically drops prices down. We've had properties, even in this kind of like sluggish, buyer environment, we've had properties go over asking. But we've had many occasions in the past 60 days where the appraisal doesn't come in. And again, if the appraisal doesn't come in, then the house typically doesn't sell for the amount that it went under agreement for. And when that happens, that drives lower comps, right? So we're seeing this dynamic. Somebody said, yes, they had a bank do 2 appraisals on a property, questioning the value. Nobody, you have to look at it from a bank's perspective. People always talk about in passing, like, oh, banks are so dumb, they don't know what they're doing. But you know what? I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, right? They know where the market is, right? So when the market is starting to shift, you have to be extra conservative, because the last thing that you want to do is give somebody a loan on a property, give them a loan 10% above what the property's worth. Then the market falls 10%. Now they've got negative 20% in equity. That's when people start letting their houses go. People hang on to their houses for dear life when they have equity, right? When they don't have equity, their motivation changes. Okay. So, related to this, again, where some of my predictions were off, and I think a lot of people's predictions were off on what I'm about to say, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates up to 3.5 points, 3.5%. They did it very quickly, caused a lot of rates to go up, caused the 10-year Treasury to go up, mortgage rates to go up. Rates everywhere are up, right? We all know this. I am surprised that inflation is still as crazy as it is. So we had a consumer price index report come out the other day. I can't remember if it was, I think it was Wednesday morning, 8:30 a.m., I believe it came out. And again, higher than expected. It was in the 8 percentage points. I think it was like 8.5 or 8.6%. This is with all of these rate hikes. So the number one purpose that the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates is to make sure that inflation goes down, because inflation is a really bad thing. When inflation is too high, your whole society can collapse. If you look at the French Revolution, actually a lot of revolutions were caused by hyperinflation. If you look at actually what led into after World War I, one of the reasons that Germany ended up with Hitler in power is because of the fact that things were so out of control because of hyperinflation that the economy was so bad that this guy comes in just saying, hey, let me take power. And he took power because of the fact that the economy was so bad. So inflation is really, really bad, and it hasn't come down. Now, what does this mean? I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants interest rates lower. Everybody wants interest rates lower. The Federal Reserve, all the banks, every borrower. Like, it's way more fun to borrow money at 3%. And there's a lot more demand for loans when somebody can buy a house at 3%. However, when inflation is too high, again, the whole society is at a risk. So the objective and the hope of the Federal Reserve was that by this point, inflation would have peaked and potentially already started reporting numbers that were coming down, not flat, but down. So inflation is being really, really stubborn. So what does that mean? That means the Federal Reserve might end up being more aggressive than what they initially thought, than what everybody initially thought. And that's what's also driving interest rates up. The other thing that we're seeing with mortgage rates, this isn't an economic prediction, this is just a fact, is that the spread between the 10-year Treasury and the 30-year fixed mortgage is actually a little bit wider than it normally is. Normally, it's about 2%, 2.5%. Right now, it's 3%. And the reason for that is because somebody getting a 7.5% interest rate right now is at a greater risk to refinance that mortgage out later. And that hurts the original bank that did that loan. So there's a lot of stuff going on economically. Adding to the fact that the Federal Reserve, myself included, I thought more stuff would be breaking at the interest rates we're at right now. And it is breaking, it's starting to break, but we're not quite seeing the layoffs that I would have suspected. If you told me, hey, mortgage rates are going to get to 7% by the end of 2022, the 10-year Treasury is going to be above 4%, I would have said, unemployment would be 8, 9, 10%. Unemployment's at 3.5% right now. Okay, so people are not getting laid off yet, and that matters. So there's a lot of stuff that has changed, but what do we actually do about it? I mean, because that's really what's important. And the other thing I want to say is that we are in really turbulent times right now. Very turbulent. Why that's important to understand is quite literally something that may be true economically today may not literally be economically true in a month from now. Okay? Why that's important? Again, I always have to pitch the fact, guys, if you're not registered for our upcoming 2-day event, make sure you're registered at www.agentinvestorevent.com. I'm always going to be talking about the economy and how it's impacting real estate at these events because it's huge. But you guys have to understand that whatever I say today, you have to be in tune with the stuff because it's going to change how you do business in 2023. All right, so let's talk about the different segments of investing that I think are important and the changes that I think you guys need to make if you are investing or you're thinking about investing. All right. So you guys know that we fix and flip a lot of houses. I think we're going to have about 130 flips this year, 2022. This is the first time I'm ever going to say this. I'm ever going to say this, but 2023 is probably going to be the toughest year to flip houses that I've been in the market. Going all the way back to 2009, I've got 13 years of flipping a bunch of houses. This is going to be the most challenging year. It's going to be so challenging to fix and flip houses in 2023 that if you are not doing it already and you're not a professional, you may want to consider sitting out 2023 for flipping. This is going to be the first time I've ever said that since I've been doing this business. And I'm going to tell you why. So when you're out there flipping houses, you need off-market deals. You need to get discounted properties in order to flip. I think it's actually going to be more challenging in 2023 to get a discount than it was in 2022 and 2021 and 2020. Why? Economic uncertainty typically makes people not take action, number one. And number two, the wider the gap gets between the interest rate somebody has and the new interest rate, the more they're going to be locked into that low interest rate house, right? If you think about like, why do people sell? Why do people move? Somebody who's upsizing, right? Going from a 3% rate to a 7% rate. We had somebody who was downsizing. They signed a contract with us. Hey, we want to downsize. They went out shopping for a house. They came back to us a week later. They go, I don't know how to tell you this, but I can't sell my house to you. I thought by downsizing, I was going to be saving money. I'm going to be paying more. So we're seeing that type of stuff. And I don't see sellers getting super motivated, right? Unless there's a lot of job losses, right? And this is where you have to pay attention to this stuff in like 30 to 60-day increments. Unless there's a lot of job losses, I don't see sellers being that motivated. What does that mean? That means if you're paying for marketing and you're doing things like mailers or pay-per-click or TV or radio or billboards, it's going to cost you more money to get a deal. In 2022 so far, it cost us on average $16,000 to get a flip, right? For every flip we do, it costs us $16,000 in mailers or TV or a pay-per-click or whatever we're doing. I think that number is going to go up in 2023. Now, at the same time, prices are falling, right? Prices are falling. They're down 10% from 90 days ago. Now, how much more that fall is, I don't know. I'm not confident because I don't know where mortgage rates are going to go. I don't know what's going to happen with layoffs. But I am confident at this point that we're not going to see price increases. And I don't think we're going to see flat prices in the next 12 months anymore. Okay? Barring a Fed pivot, barring mortgage rates going back down to 3 or 4%, I don't see that happening. I just don't think buyers actually can afford the houses with 7% rates. And God forbid they go higher, right? So it's costing us more money. It's harder to get a discounted deal because sellers aren't motivated because they've got these 3% interest rates. But then you've got buyers who can't afford to pay the high prices anymore. Okay? So if you're somebody who is thinking about doing their first fix and flip in 2023, unless you're going to partner with somebody like us, like if you're an Inner Circle member and you can partner with us and we take the financial risk, I would strongly consider being a little bit more cautious in 2023. Now, does that mean you do nothing? Oh, God, no. And let me be clear about that. There are a million and one things that you can do to grow your investing business. That doesn't necessarily mean that you flip a house in 2023. There are more actions, there are more processes you can set up, there's more education that you can do, there are more things that you can do. But this is the year that you want to be cautious. This is the year you want to be cautious. And another theme of this whole conversation for today is make sure that you're doing what works, what you know works. 2023 is not going to be the year to go out there and try a bunch of new stuff, right? I love trying a bunch of new stuff. It's one of the reasons that our company's been successful. We try things. If they work, we do more of them. We try other things. They don't work, so we stop doing them. 2023 is the year where you double down on what you know works and hold off those experiments maybe until 2024 or until the volatility in the market stops. So I just want to look in the comment section. Does anybody have any questions on anything we've covered so far or anything related to what I'm talking about? I've got more to cover, but I want to make sure that if you guys have questions, type them into the chat box. Okay. So one way that you guys can avoid, risk on flips is by joining the Inner Circle and by partnering with us on deals. So if you're in the Inner Circle, you don't have to put up the money and you don't have to do the construction. So with that being said, you can completely avoid risk and still flip a house in 2003 if you're a part of the Inner Circle. If you're not a part of the Inner Circle or don't want to be a part of the Inner Circle, that's okay. But I would just advocate being a lot more careful. Somebody said, would you decrease marketing dollars? That's a very individual question, but this is the first year I would consider decreasing marketing dollars. Again, a lot of the things I'm saying right now are things that I've never said since I've been in business, right? Somebody said, what about strategies for the brokerage side of things? So can you give me some examples of like where you would want strategies? So somebody said, how can wholesalers make it through a slower time for fix and flip investors? So I actually have something in front of me right now that literally says reasons why wholesaling will be tough in 2023. Now, a lot of the stuff I'm saying, it's not good news. It's not. And we actually had a company quarterly meeting where we sat there. We do this every quarter for a day. And I was going through all these items. And I go, man, there are strategies. There are strategies, and I'm going to talk about those, but there are definitely strategies. But there is no way to get around the fact that quick turn deals, wholesaling, fix and flip, we don't have the wind in our back anymore. We just don't. When we were fixing and flipping the last 3 or 4 years, you would look and you would say, hey, ARV's 400. All right, I'm going to make 40 grand. But knowing in the back of your mind, like, okay, I know it pencils out to 40 grand, but I bet I'm going to make 70. I bet I'm going to make 70. And that happened a lot. In fact, it happened so much that some people we're penciling out, hey, I'm going to make 10, but I think I'm going to really make 40. And this is where wholesaling, and that's the reason why wholesaling becomes so difficult in this type of environment. Okay. In order to wholesale and make a bunch of money, you either have to have one of two things happening, and neither of which I think are going to happen in 2023. In order to wholesale and make a bunch of money, you either need to get the properties super, super discounted. Like my first deal I ever did, 13 Cameron Ave in Somerville, my numbers told me I could pay 400. I got it under contract for 300, right? And that only happened in the beginning of 2009 because the market was decimated. It's the only reason. Sellers were super motivated. The other way wholesalers can make a bunch of money is when cash buyers are super aggressive. When do you see that? Well, we just got through with that period. We got through with that period from 2019 to beginning of 2022. You had cash buyers, frankly, just being dumb. Being like, hey, this only pencils out to 7K profit, but I know I'm going to get 30 over asking, right? You had cash buyers that were speculating. So one of those two things needs to happen in order to make a lot of money wholesaling. Now, if it's costing me $16,000 to get a cash deal, but I can wholesale and I can make 30, I'm cash positive, right? It cost me 16, but I was able to make a $30,000 wholesale fee. This is going to be a really bold statement. It's really going to be a bold statement. I think it's almost going to be impossible to make money as a wholesaler in 2023. Not impossible, but almost impossible. Because I don't think you're going to have either of those two dynamics. I don't think you're going to be able to get deals discounted to that extent. And then I don't think cash buyers are going to be aggressive anymore. In fact, I know a lot of cash buyers are pulling back right now, right? And this is actually, I should say this, us included. This is the first year I've ever said, hey, let's not do more than the last year. And you know how hard that is for me to say? It's very, very difficult for me to say, hey, you know what? We could probably do more deals, but it's not smart to do it. Okay. So I talked about wholesaling. So a couple other pieces, for quick turns, and I'm defining quick turns as flips and quick turns as wholesaling. If you were planning to start a marketing budget, you've never had a marketing budget before, but if you were planning to start in 2023, I probably wouldn't do it. I think it's going to be very hard to be profitable. Like I mentioned, I would really advocate two things. Number one, doing stuff that's free. And number two, also just making sure that you're keeping your eyes out for the opportunities that come up that don't cost you anything, right? This would probably be the year, if you haven't done this already, that I would make sure that everybody in your SOI knows you're an investor, knows you're looking for deals. Make sure you have a newsletter going out every month. Make sure you have good emails going out. Make sure your social media highlights the fact that you're not just an agent, but you're an investor. So again, while I'm saying be careful, don't be aggressive in 2023, that doesn't mean work less, right? Don't read into, hey, I have nothing to do. There are 1,000,001 things that you can do, but it just may require you to be more patient on purchases. So now I want to talk about 2000 buying and holding in 2023. So somebody said we will end 2022 with 2 million to 2.5 million in assignments. During this year, we started to buy and hold more. Our goal for 2023 is to buy 100 to 150 doors in our market, and we get 1.5% minimum on all the rentals. Do you think a pivot from assigning to buy and hold is smart? I don't know your market. I don't think. I can't see who this is, unfortunately. It says Facebook user. I have to know your market. I'd have to know what those numbers look like. But I am going to talk about buying and holding in 2023. This is why the inner circle is so important, though, because you guys are on a training, right? And like the answer to that question, like I could give a quick answer. It's going to be the wrong answer because the reality is that question, do you think a pivot from assigning to buy and hold in 2023 is smart? The honest answer is it depends on your personal situation, what market you're in, what resources you have, all that good stuff, right? So that's what I need to know. And that's the type of stuff that we do in the inner circle. And again, I can't see who it is. If it's somebody who's in the inner circle, please, please, please send me a Facebook message immediately and we can talk about that. If you're not in the inner circle and want to learn more about joining the inner circle, make sure you book a call at www.agentinvestorinnercircle.com and we can discuss that specific situation in more detail so I can give you a real answer and not one that's just kind of like, hey, this is whatever. All right, so buying and holding in 2023. And this will answer, I think, at a baseline, some of the question that you just asked me. There are going to be better deals to buy and hold in 2023 than there has been in the last few years. This is 100% guarantee. When I say better deals, at least I mean better prices. There are definitely going to be better prices for sure. It's interesting because while this is again just another weird dynamic of this all. I think we're going to see in 2023 people who live in single family homes or condos or townhouses be very unmotivated to sell. However, I do think we're going to see some motivation in the multifamily arena. There are people that have to sell in the multifamily arena. There are people who bought too high in the past few years. And there are people with adjustable rates that are going to get clobbered. So I think that we're going to see I know we're going to see softening in multifamily prices for the first time in a while. And what I'm talking about is 3 families, 6 families, 10 units. There is going to be less demand. And the thing that's different about multifamilies is that people who are buying them are investors. And with interest rates higher, they have to pay less in order to get a bank loan, right? Because if you're getting a commercial bank loan, the actual, interest, you have to be able to carry that property or you won't get the loan. So I don't know that 2023 is necessarily a year to be like, hey, I'm cashing in all my chips. I'm going to buy a ton of buy and hold properties. But it may not be a bad year to start kind of dollar cost averaging into the multifamily space if you haven't already. I don't know that we're going to see the discounts that we would need to see for me to say, geez, this is like the opportunity of a lifetime. Like I remember in 2009, before I ever did my first deal, I met with this guy, Jimmy Jordan, out of the Boston area. Sat down with him at the 99 restaurant. And he said to me, yeah, I'm going into Dorchester, which is a part of Boston. I'm paying $150,000 for 3 families. And those 3 families were renting out for $1,500 a month. So he was getting $4,500 a month in rent, buying them for $150,000, putting in $100,000. So he was cash flowing a couple $1,000s a month in a section of Boston that you knew was going to appreciate. That was a no-brainer time. We're not going to probably be there in 2023, which is why I wouldn't say don't buy in 2023, but you don't probably have to rush in 2023. In fact, there is likely going to be better deals in 2024 than there will be in 2023, which is why for some of you, depending on what your goals are, you may be better served parking some of your capital in like a 12-month investment vehicle with us and getting a decent 1-year return on your cash and holding off a little bit longer. Or at least being patient. I mean, again, this is the most frustrating thing, I think, for all of us, because we're all go-getters. If you're on this call, on a Tuesday at 11, listening to an economic update, right, from somebody like me, who's not even that exciting to listen to, you're motivated. You're motivated enough to listen to me talk about where things are going in 2023. If that's the case, and again, being patient is probably going to be the best thing that you can do for 2023. And I know it's frustrating to hear that, because I want to take massive action. You want to take massive action. The massive action that I would suggest you take are the following things. And these are like ultimately my recommendations on some of this stuff. Number one, again, kills me to say this, cut all unnecessary expenses right now. Some of you live lean and mean all the time. If you're not living lean and mean right now, this is the time to get lean and mean. Cut as many unnecessary expenses. If you're not getting ROI on something, trim the fat, get into a good P&L position. Number two, patience. Patience. You guys just have to be patient in 2023. You have to really figure out what things are going to move the needle in your business to have a good 2023. Because I don't think anybody's going to be. There's going to be a statement I'm sure will be controversial, but I don't think anybody's going to have their best year in 2023. I think 2023 is about surviving the best you can, so that as other people leave the market, you're better positioned. And you guys are going to see this on the aging side. Wait until you see. You're going to be surprised at how many people in the next 12 months leave real estate. You're going to be surprised. I'm already starting to see it. I'm already starting to see some people leave real estate, get a job, right? Because if you get this tug of war, you're working with a buyer, they're not that motivated. You're working with a seller, they're not that motivated. The last few years, as much as we all complained, hey, buyers can't buy anything. Well, yeah, that's true. But your buyer was also willing to waive all contingencies, go 30 over asking, make an offer without even barely seeing it, waive inspection, right? Buyers were motivated. There just wasn't inventory. Now, there's not going to be inventory and they're not going to be motivated, and the sellers aren't going to be as motivated. You're going to see a lot of agents leave the space in the next 12 months. So you've got to be patient, right? And what will happen is 2023 will likely be a clearing out period. If you're in really good position in 2024, and again, I know this is not a fun live stream. We left our quarterly meeting. My partner Bill said to me when we were done, he goes, wow, this is the first time, I left a quarterly meeting not feeling excited about the growth of the company. And it's interesting because our dynamic is I'm always the growth guy, pushing. And he's always the more conservative one. And this year we kind of flopped. We flipped. And I say, this is the year we got to be conservative. So cut all unnecessary expenses. Be patient on expansions and purchases. New lead sources, new this, new that. Go slow. Make sure you have it mastered before you take another step. Focus on what works. So if you're already flipping houses, or you're already buying and holding, or you're already doing vacation rentals, whatever it is that's working, really think about what's working the best. And again, this is going to be the year. Focus on the 20% of things that give you 80% of the results. It can be really fun to do a lot of other things, but this is just not the year for it. Another thing that we're doing, we're going to start doing, and I don't know what the results are going to be, but we're going to start offering 2-1 buy downs on mortgages for properties that we're flipping. So how it's going to work is if rates are 7% today, for the first year, the person's going to get a 5% rate. The second year, the person's going to get a 6% rate. The third year, the person's going to get a 7% rate. And that's just like a tactical thing that you can do to buy down somebody's rate to get a buyer potentially a little bit more motivated to buy your property. Because I do still firmly think that rates are going to be down in a year to 2 years from now. I firmly think that. I could be wrong, but I think the probability that rates are back below 5 in the next 2 years, I think it's fairly high. Okay. So with all that being said, do me a favor, type into the comment section if you guys have any questions. But I want to let you guys know what we need to kind of do moving forward. I talked about some strategies, what I think is going to happen, etc. We need to really start thinking about the economy in 30-day windows. Things can change in 30 days. It's crazy. I don't know if you've all seen, but Compass, which is, I think they're officially now the biggest brokerage by volume in the United States, maybe even the world, but definitely the United States. Their stock has been getting crushed, absolutely crushed. They were down to, I think, about $2.30 a share. And when they got that low, there started to be rumors circulating that they were going to be sold. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is not to create any sort of gossip or anything related to that company. But I think we're going to start to see some things as interest rates continue to be up, sales are lower. We're going to see some breakage in the economy, whether that ends up impacting Compass or another major player or a lender. People are talking about what's going to be the Lehman moment. If you guys remember from the last financial crash in 2007, the Lehman moment was when everybody was like, wow, this thing isn't good. This probably can't be contained anymore. There's going to be impact kind of all around. Compass could be that company, could be another company, but there is going to be some serious damage, potentially from companies that we don't even know are in trouble right now. Or maybe we think that they're a little bit in trouble, but they're not in that much trouble. So like I mentioned, if you guys aren't registered for the 2-day event, it's about 3 weeks away. As crazy as this sounds, there is probably going to be a change in the next 3 weeks that's worth talking about. Make sure, again, you register at www.agentinvestorevent.com. But what I'm looking at the most, number one, are mortgage rates. Related to that, the inflation. Okay, so if we see inflation start to come down, mortgage rates are going to come down. What's going on in the labor market? That's another thing that I'm really watching closely. Okay, what's going on with jobs, right? And this is a bad thing, but in an ideal world, inflation would go down. Not that I want layoffs, but that layoffs would cause the Federal Reserve to be less aggressive on their rate hikes. So there's a lot to kind of think about, and I want to put a caveat in here that at any moment, everything I just said could change, and I'm going to tell you why. 90% of all of the stuff I'm talking about today is driven by one thing: higher mortgage interest rates. If for whatever reason something breaks in the economy that's huge, they were talking a couple weeks ago about Credit Suisse going bankrupt. That would be huge. If companies like that go bankrupt, if something cataclysmic happens in the economy, at a day's notice the Federal Reserve could drop rates. I don't know if you all remember this when the pandemic hit. I don't even remember what interest rate we were at. I think we were at like 2.5% on the federal funds, and I think we were about at 5% on mortgage rates. Pandemic happened one day. Jerome Powell came out, slashed interest rates to 0. That lit a fire. That lit the fire on price appreciation. So we need to take the action based on what is happening today, but we need to also understand that what is happening today can change quickly. So guys, if you're not on my live streams every week, please join me every Tuesday at 11. And if you're not registered for the event coming up, make sure you go to www.agentinvestorevent.com. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and I'll see you again next Tuesday at 11.